Morning all. So over the last few weeks, you've started to see a pivot, not just in the comments of Leo Varadkar, but also, I suppose, between members of Fine Gael. So you had Helen McEntee pushing the hate speech laws, and then you'd Simon Harris coming out saying there's no need for them because we already have sufficient laws. So we don't need anything else to kind of qualify things that are already illegal, right? And that you can already be charged and prosecuted for. And now this morning I just seen a news article, a little clip on the Irish Times, and they're interviewing people and asking them in the streets, would you vote for Simon Harris? And they're young people, and they're saying, no, we wouldn't, no, we wouldn't, no, we wouldn't, maybe not, no, we wouldn't, right? This is a massive shift. A massive shift. And you continuously hear of, I think Micheál Martin said it, Helen McEntee is saying it, that the next government. They're not saying if we are part of the next government. They're just continuously saying we believe the next government will pick up the baton of the hate speech laws, right? I think also in the last few weeks I've seen the Green Party say that they will be speaking to Social Democrats and some of the smaller parties about potentially making up the next government, right? Factor into that money. So we've had the big budget bonanza, right? Where the current government are attempting to blackmail you and get your vote by giving you back the money that they took from you in the first place. Not all of it, just a little sprinkle of it, a couple of 100,000s on your ice cream, right? That's it. You don't get the tub, just a few of them. Now, if we roll back a few years into the COVID lockdowns, we had the almost complete shutdown of the day-to-day Irish economy in Ireland, obviously, right? We focus on Ireland, which resulted in the closure of many family-owned and small and medium-sized businesses, right? So pubs, restaurants, coffee places, and a myriad of other businesses are after closing down because they weren't making sufficient money, right? The tourism industry, we weren't bringing in the sort of money that you'd need to kind of stabilise and sustain hotels, right? Now, many of these hotels were getting money from the government to house the tens of thousands of men that have been coming in here, right? So where is that money coming from? So over the 2-3 years of COVID and the lockdowns, from the ground up, the economy wasn't being replenished, right? So the money wasn't being pumped into businesses. The economy wasn't being stabilized by the day-to-day interactions of people. Okay? So we weren't generating the wealth. The government weren't generating the amount of wealth needed to be able to roll out these budget bonanzas, right? So I would ask you, where is this money coming from? You can't just quickly recover from the fact that you shut down the vast majority of businesses in Ireland. Like that's not how the trading of money works, right? So the government, they were also incentivizing businesses to close, right? So they were pumping money back into certain areas of the country. So where was this money coming from? You might say they had a surplus of previous taxes over the years. Why is there a surplus? Why isn't all of this money being pumped back into the nation, into the state, right? Into people? But that's a different conversation, right? So you had the crippling of the economy. You have the immigration thing where billions and billions and billions are being spent on these people. It's not coming from us, largely, right? So where is this money coming from? The government have to borrow this money. They've borrowed untold amounts of money. Now they'll say, well, look, we had the Apple 13 billion, which I think they spent millions trying not to get years ago. They fought against having to take that money from Apple, right? And now they're like, oh, well, look, we got it, and now we're able to give a little back to the folk, right? Fine and well. But there's going to be a downfall from that money, because that money that is borrowed in order to fund all of the COVID stuff, which God knows how much that cost, and in order to be rolling out these budget bonanza nonsenses, right? So the government have continued borrowing money. And I believe what they might be setting up is the next government to bear the brunt of that when that whole system comes crashing down. They'll get out hands kind of somewhat clean, because look, we gave you loads of money before we left, and now the next government that's in here, the economy's after falling apart, the bottom fell out of it, all debts need to be repaid, we don't have enough money in the current system, we don't have enough physical capital to be able to pay back the debts that we have, we need to keep borrowing, the economy's after crashing, misery will unfold. And I believe that should this government be voted out in the election, that's what will come next. The economy will fall out, and it will be on the heads of the next government, should it not be the status quo or subsidiary parties, right? Or related parties. So I think that's what we might be looking at in the next year or two. But I don't believe that if should it come, I don't believe that is or will be the fault of the next government. It's already in the air. Like, you can't continuously borrow billions and billions and billions, money that's made out of thin air. It's printed out of thin air. There's nothing backing that money, right? So just say the amount of solid cash money capital in Ireland is, just say, 200 billion, whatever it is, right? Our debt is above that. Same with America. Like, America owes trillions. Trillions. There's not the amount of money. If everyone in the world paid back all of the money that they had to pay off their national debt would still be there. So what happens is, in order to continue paying back this debt, you have to borrow from these big banks again, with interest added to it, of course. So in order to continue paying off the debt, you have to continue borrowing, which means you accrue more debt, which means you have to continue borrowing. So this system, it falls and breaks apart every now and again, and it gets scaffolded up off the backs of you, because all of the money that's called back, the debt that's called back, has to come out of someone's pockets, and it's yours. But in order to continue propping up this system, we then need to continue borrowing more money. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart, right? And you might say that it needs to fall apart, and I would say, yes, it does. And I think that it will probably fall apart in the next couple of years, or that might be the plan of what these people are thinking, should they not get elected in the next general election. I think if they do, they will continue propping up this nonsense system by continuing to borrow the money, right? So just something to be aware of. Should the economy fold if nationalists get into power, I don't believe that it will be the fault of them, largely, right? I think that it's already in the works. And that's why you hear the next government. But they're not saying, should we be in the next government, or when we get elected next, right? And you can understand this by seeing the pivot. So all of a sudden, you have Leo Varadkar, whose hands were on the reins for a long, long, long time, talking about the problems that he created and addressing them as, well, now I recognise them as significant problems now that I'm not in a position to do anything about it. But you were, right? And you can see the mainstream media start to follow this narrative as well, of changing the minds of people and getting them thinking that this government isn't going to be there now, I won't vote for Simon Harris and that. Because when have you seen that lately? So all of a sudden, why? Why are these things, these organisations and these people turning? because that's what they're trying to bring you towards, right?